Let's talk about advanced persistent threats and best practices on how to combat those. I prefer to say that APT stands for adaptive phishing techniques, because you'll see that in most cases that's what this is mostly about. So, first of all, who is doing this? The important thing to understand is that this is not the typical hacker, but these are sophisticated ones. That one thing that is very important is that they have state sponsorship and protection. That makes them very effective. What the target of the attack is they are really look for privileged users. Sysadmin with machine with powerful access, or executives. They typically look at the email and they search for intellectual property. They will be trying to get to that accidental insider who will click where he's not supposed to and allow access to the hacker. What is it that they do is that they bypass traditional security systems, firewalls, and standard antivirus, even some cases IPSs with even host protection, even defeating multi-factor authentication, sometimes even strong password, the planet keylogger, and you don't have privileged identity management in. So what is the vector, the exploitation? In many cases, email is the prime. Sometimes it's just drive and download, which is the waterhole effect. I mean, waterhole is where the animals go to drink, and then that's where the tigers go. Well, companies as sophisticated as Apple and Microsoft has fallen. Developers in those companies have fallen into those attacks by going into a site they suspect. That they don't suspect anything about it. It's just like that they periodically go. The hackers compromise that site and use it as a launch platform for their attacks. And they're going to be using sometimes the least sophisticated mechanisms that they can use. They don't want to use their 0 days or the crown jewels. They will use the best, that is sophisticated, and they will look for on-patch systems. Use combination of SQL injection, this is a good one, and cross-site scripting, and they target Adobe, Microsoft, both the operating system as well as a mail attachment, and of course Java these days. And the objective is to copy your data. Some people say, well, it's stealing your data, but it's a pernicious way of stealing stuff, because it's not like a sniper that that we will see that when they move is when we can actually see it. This sniper is more like a camouflage paparazzi that you don't know that is actually copying your data and using it. So that's the scary part. So the objective is really that data of yours, intellectual property or other. And let's see what are the different phases where they operate on these attacks. Well, the first is the recon phase. And during the reconnaissance, they are going to be doing lots of Google searches. They're going to be doing social media research. They will even use the traditional phone to help the suspect believe that this is the case, or gather information by talking to administrative people, etc. They get a lot of password databases, so they can actually, if they get some hashes of a password database, they will definitely get to know what the password is. The objective in this phase is to devise an attack to get him or her to trust. So the first messages are going to be, kind of oh, this is a co-worker of my company somewhere in India. And they spoof mail or social for that, and get them to trust that initial message, and then they will click on the link that will actually launch the attack. They will gather information about company projects and the lingo that is actually used in that company. And let me tell you, in the past they used to have bad English. Some people are from abroad. In this case, they have good English because that state sponsorship now put linguistic people as part of these teams. So again, once I get him to trust, I get him or her to click, and that launches the beginning of the attack, the first phase. So what are the best practices? What can I do to protect my company and against those attacks in this particular phase? Well, there's one that is controversially effective, but you have to do it anyway. You have to minimize the exposure by doing user education. But one thing that I will encourage you, if you can do it, is to experiment with your executives, if you can. And there are sites like fishme.com or wombatsecurity.com that have sites that will do what hackers do and get the executive to click where they're not supposed to, and when they do, or privileged user, when they do, they will get wiser about it. The other thing that is very important is to limit social, but do it wisely. You're not going to say no one can do Facebook in the company. But one thing is that you can do is only this particular group within my company can post messages in Facebook or any social media. But anyone else can only see the stuff, but they cannot post. And that reduces the temptation of doing copy-paste of corporate data and place it in there. But you need to have the capability of actually doing that wisely per group. Another thing that you should do is clearly have a way in your mail system, it's on mail template, to differentiate very well internal and very visible versus external email. Why is that? Well, what hackers will do is that they will try to spoof the mail system and make it look like an internal mail. And when you receive an internal mail from some co-worker of yours, your guards are kind of low. You can have a trusting, well, this is a co-worker. If you get an email from outside, then you might be more wary. But what they will do is that using the lingo and some spoof email, they will make it look like if it's coming from your own company. And you need to clearly highlight that in your mail system. The other thing is that your users should understand that when the mail leaves your provider, so you go to, let's say, from your corporate mail to Gmail, or from Gmail to Yahoo or whatever, all that is unencrypted. There very seldom is the case that stuff is encrypted. So consider it public, and people need to understand that when they write something out on the mail, particularly if it's going to be leaving the corporate mail system, it's going to be public. You need to teach them to make sure that they do not click on anything that they are not looking for. So if you are looking for an Adobe update, you go to adobe.com, that's fine. But if you get a pop-up saying, oh, your Flash is up to date, you need to update it, your users should be taught not to do that. And you need to make sure that they use, on the topic of passwords, that they use strong password, and they are unique per site. And we'll see a way of actually enforcing these to make sure that the corporate passwords are not used for Facebook or any other social media, which is normally the case. So this is the first phase, the recon, and it's going to go through the break-in, the radio home, the lateral move, and sending information home. And you want to make sure that the hackers spend the most time here and the less time here. You know, the farther along that you find them, then it's going to be the harder to actually protect your company. So let's move into the next phase, onto the break-in. Well, what they're going to be doing is really trying to go typically with SQL injection, exploiting SQL injection and cross-site scripting, also Java vulnerabilities. The objective is going to be to try to do something that will allow them to install a remote access tool. What are the best practices? Once they are targeting your company for this, you're not a target of opportunity anymore, you are a target of choice. Well, you need to make sure that you get all the vulnerabilities and you fix them. But the problem is that today that is not the case, because you need to do this the smart way. And a technology like Vulnerability Manager from QRadar can actually help you. I encourage you to look in YouTube and search for YouTube QRadar Vulnerability Manager, and you'll find a way of really making sure that your vulnerabilities get fixed. This is not negligence. There are way too many vulnerabilities. Unless you provide some additional tools, your team will not be able to fix them all. But this technology will help you that. Also, you need to have a good SIM like QRadar that can actually detect, basic things like aggressive scanning, external scanning, of course, and other, baseline analysis and other techniques with the flows and all the richness that QRadar can find, evidence of beginning of exploitation. And you should allow that good SIM to be able to inspect both incoming and outgoing SSL traffic, because hackers hide on their SSL session. You need to make sure that you can actually do that, and we can do that with our IPSs. Allows us to inspect both type of SSL. But this may not be enough. You may need to get some help at the endpoint to detect that. And there's nothing better for that than Trusteer. Let me actually talk a little bit in detail about Trusteer. This is worth an extra chart. Trusteer is all about detecting and helping you, because you need to assume that your endpoint is going to get compromised in spite of your best efforts. So what do I do about it? And this is, of course, valid for desktop as well as mobile devices. So what they're going to be trying to do is basically two things. The malware is going to be trying to steal and use your credentials later. There goes the phishing, technique. And they can also try to alter the transaction details. So let's say that you are sending some money to your son in Florida, St. Petersburg, Florida, and the hacker is going to be trying to make that go to St. Petersburg, Russia. We're going to be talking about, an important fact, which is 90% of these attacks happen on Java, 2% on Adobe, and the rest on Microsoft and others. So if we can cover, these components, we're going to be in pretty good shape. We're going to see how we do that. But one is that, what is it that we've been doing so far trying to detect this and hasn't been very effective? Well, A is the concept of blacklisting. And this is, best example is antivirus. But because antivirus mutate, they are pretty much not very effective. It's like, bringing a helmet to a battlefield. It's going to do you some good, but it won't prevent you from getting killed. The other stuff that people have been doing is sandboxing. In Java and Adobe. Adobe has been doing actually a very good job, but it's very easy to escape from that sandboxing. Particularly in the case of Java, we've been seeing plenty of examples of that. Another approach that is actually can be very effective is behavior monitoring, things like FireEye. But the problem with that is that you need to know the threat. So if the threat is not known, then the attack was going to go undetected. The other approach that people have tried is application whitelisting, meaning I'm going to only allow this group of applications to run on my system and nothing else. But this is difficult to actually implement. And unless you are in a retail environment where all the machines are very similar, then this stuff is either difficult or too expensive to actually implement, or too restrictive. What Trusteer brings is a new concept. It's called, listen to the details, it's application stateful, and this is the key word, whitelisting. I'm not whitelisting the application, but the actual possible states that the application can actually be on. And it also does a very good job on credential protection. How this works? Well, Trusteer has a component on the desktop, both mobile as well as a traditional PC or Mac. It runs on Mac and PC, and has a server component. So the first thing that is actually going to do is help you protect your credentials. So what the hacker is going to try to do is get some phishing attack, and it's going to be trying to, let's say that you have some malware on your environment, and it's going to try to get you to click on that particular link. So what Trusteer is going to be doing is it's going to protect your credentials. Let's say that you have this corporate password that you use on the corporation. You don't want people to actually, number one is click on something that they think it is a corporate site and it's not. And second is using that same password in something that is not the corporate environment. How we can endorse that? Well, what we do is two things. One is that we have a URL, we have a secure DNS service to make sure that you don't get spoofed, you don't get thinking that you're going into the wrong IP address, but you actually go into the right IP address. But we also, when we are protecting the credentials, the password, we actually hash the password, and we know that that password can only go, and we enforce this, to the real site. So if you are phished and you think that you're going to a site that is your bank or some particular place, we know better, because between the secure DNS and other technologies, we know that's not the bank. I'm not going to let you put that password. But if you actually want to actually use the same password into social media, we're going to say, no, pal, this password is too important to allow you to actually use it. And in fact, I encourage you to actually download Rapport. It's a free download. You can actually experiment with it and see, and it can start protecting you from your banking transactions even today. But how is it that Trusteer determines that stateful? I haven't talked much about stateful, what that stateful protection is. In other words, how can Trusteer know when a transaction is going to a good state and making a good API call, or when it's a bad API call? Well, the good thing is that Trusteer knows. I mean, we can teach Trusteer for all the Java, again, Adobe, those 90%, and Microsoft Office apps, which are the right state. For example, the application is in here. The user can click File and can click Save, or can do things like I'm writing to a file. That might be a valid thing to do. I am adding a new payee outside the US, when I'm outside the US. Well, I might not allow you to do that when you are not in the US, because that's kind of risk. I'm initiating a command and control communication via RC traffic. Well, that typically is something bad. I'm not going to let that happen. I'm launching a keylogger or a screen capture software. I'm not letting that from happening, typically. I'm writing to some Windows registry key that are sensible. Well, I'm not going to allow that. I'm installing a rat tool. Just you get the picture. We can detect all the states, and we will only allow the right things, the right states to go, and we will block those attempts to going into a state that we do not allow. And how we enforce these? Well, on the desktop or the phone, let's talk about the desktop. It's Windows or Mac OS. What we do is that we sit between the API. So we have here report or Apex installed on your workstation. And what we actually do, and through the browser or to the native desktop, is that we can intercept API calls. And we can determine what are the right things that you can and cannot do. But also, when we see that somebody is doing something that they're not supposed to, what we can do when the hacker is trying to, use your credentials or steal your credentials, we can produce actionable intelligence that is sent to the SIEM as well as the Trusteer server. So if we see those credentials coming into my environment, I'm going to be far more careful from that point on.